Why did I want to be in a band? I wanted to be in a band because I didn't want to get a real job. I didn't really necessarily want to be, at first, like a successful, famous rock star. I was just terrified of having to get a job in an office, and just kind of wanted to be creative and just put food on the table and pay the rent, and just try not to enter, the system, I suppose. And I think I would have been satisfied with that if that was all that would have happened. But things took off very quickly. We became quite successful at the beginning of our careers with our first album, and then what happens is that as soon as you've tasted a little bit of success and a little bit of stardom, you have a tendency to get hungry for more. I kind of went from living with unemployment benefit and housing benefit to all of a sudden having a lot of attention and traveling around the world and going to a lot of parties and having a lot of opportunities, which I'd never really dreamt of having. That kind of success sort of has very early on in your career, and when you're very young, has a tendency to go straight to your head and feed the ego immensely. That's maybe not such a bad thing, considering it probably takes a certain amount of ego to sustain this kind of rock and roll circus act for any prolonged period of time. It's been a funny ride. It's not until recently, I think, that I actually came to terms with the idea that perhaps this band was special. I think what's special about this band is that myself and my songwriting partner in the band, Stefan, have managed to sustain a friendship and a creative relationship over a period of almost 20 years. At the beginning, I had a feeling that it was all going to be over quite quickly, and that we were kind of playing a joke on people, perhaps, and that sooner or later we were going to be found out, and that, so we kind of behaved as outrageously as we could, because we kind of had this feeling that there was kind of no tomorrow, or that sooner or later it was kind of all going to end. Somehow we've managed to sustain it over a period of almost a couple of decades now. I think I've probably come to terms with the idea that like a lot of other bands that that have a certain amount of longevity, that there is probably something unique about us that enables us to continue to forge some kind of singular vision that sort of allows us to be in such a privileged position that to still be given the opportunity to be creative, and for people to listen, and for people to show up at shows and still get excited about the music. I'm really not too sure what I would have done if this hadn't have worked out. my first love, I guess, was acting, and it's what I ended up studying at university. It's something that I got really into when I was about 11, and I guess I probably would have ended up pursuing some kind of career in performance, some kind of performance art. Making little films, and just trying to find a kind of a crossover point between music, film, and acting, which is kind of what I was doing by the time I was graduating from university. So I probably would have gone down that line. It would have to have been something to do with being on stage, I think. There's a certain exhibitionist need in me, I guess, that needs to be satisfied at all costs. I don't necessarily feel anxious about putting the music out on record or releasing it, because by that time it's gotten kind of a seal of approval from a lot of people whose opinion I respect. I feel more anxious about going out and performing it in front of people. I still get very nervous at times about performing, and I still get anxious about the idea of traveling around the world for a year to 18 months at a time, like some kind of gypsy or traveling minstrel. Because it's kind of, it's very, very much like living in a bubble, and takes you far away from the people that ground you. Yeah, there have been a few occasions on tour where I felt like I've kind of begun to lose my mind a little bit, and to feel really sort of disconnected from reality, and completely disconnected from real life. When that happens, you kind of start to behave in ways which are in ways that you could only really kind of get away with by being in a band, by the very, very nature of the fact that you get to leave the city that night and drive to another town. So you're able to run away from whatever consequences of your actions. But that comes from, I think, a prolonged disconnect from real life and reality. I think there are magical moments that take place when an audience is making as much effort to connect with the band than the band is making to connect with the audience. And you kind of, there's an exchange of energy that kind of, where the people in the crowd and the people on the stage kind of meet in the middle. And there's a certain kind of synergy which is created, a kind of a sense of collective euphoria. And during those moments, when that occurs, as a musician, you find yourself kind of behaving in a completely non-intellectual way. You're completely in the moment, and you're not thinking about what you're playing anymore. Things become very, very automatic, and the only way I can kind of describe that is that it feels like a moment of transcendence. It's almost like a bit of an out-of-body experience, and sort of, you experience a rush of adrenaline which is, you know, as intense as the rush one could experience from the consumption of a controlled substance. I think my 15-year-old self would probably think I was a bit of a sellout, really. My 15-year-old self was a terrible alterno snob. I remember being 17, and that's when Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana came out. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's way too commercial. That's like pop music. So I think my 15-year-old self would probably look at the music that we were making today and that we maybe made over the past 5 or 10 years and think that it was just, that I was a complete sellout. But that's okay. I'm glad I'm not that alterno snob anymore.